There are only really two avenues, viable avenues, to toughen sanctions that might cause the North Koreans to begin to bend in negotiations about their nuclear and missile issues. One is sanctioning Chinese banks. Many Chinese banks allow the North Koreans to move money back and forth to support these programs. And any toughening of sanctions, I think, would require the United States to do that, to start sanctioning an array of Chinese banks that we know are engaged in this kind of collaboration with North Korea. The second option, and this is what I have written about, is to lay a resolution in the Security Council calling on all UN member states, i.e. China, to cut off oil shipments to North Korea, which I believe would be the toughest sanction, and where I think with a sophisticated public strategy could put some real pressure on China and at least spark a much more open debate in China, within China, about China's policies toward North Korea. Besides those two options, is there another option, Ambassador Gucci, that you could think of to pressure the Chinese, other than those two options, with regard to sanctions? And finally, I'll make a quick last point. When the North Koreans have that capability to hit all of our bases in the Pacific and the U.S. West Coast, they're going to want to negotiate at that point. And they're going to sit down and look us across the table, and they're going to say, are you Americans going to be willing to jeopardize San Francisco so you can defend Seoul? And I think the American response right now is in the realm of the uncertain when we get into the early 2020s about what that answer would be. But in terms of what they would lay on the table to us, what did the North Koreans specifically say in Kuala Lumpur about the peace treaty? That would be basically my second question. Did they really lay out what they want in a peace treaty, whom they would want negotiating with them? Did they give you any real details about this? And also the priority to the peace treaty and any new round of negotiations between the U.S. and Pyongyang.
Larry, thank you. I want to respond to some of these things, but one thing principally, and I would like your attention. I was thinking of jumping up and running to the back of the room and locking the door before anybody left, because I wanted to get this out and I wanted to make sure nobody left here not understanding what I wanted to convey because I wasn't good enough at conveying it, so let me try it again. There are two different words. One is preventive strike, preventive war. The other is preemptive strike. When the United States of America in 2003 moved into Iraq, that was a preventive war. The administration at the time used the word preemptive. It did because the word preemptive has standing both in terms of international law and in terms of just war theory, the ethics. You are allowed under international law and under laws of ethics, you are allowed, if your enemy is on your border and about to attack, you are allowed to attack him first. You don't have to wait and suffer that strike. That's preemption if you are about to be attacked. If you get up one morning and look at trend lines in another country and say in 5 or 10 years, that country is going to be our enemy still, but a lot stronger, let's go to war now, that's That's not a preemptive strike. That's a preventive war. What I wanted to say, and thought I said, but maybe not clearly enough, is I am opposed to preventive war. Opposed to preventive war with North Korea. I am not opposed. Indeed, I would insist that my government, as a citizen, launch a preemptive strike against North Korea if it came to the confident and serious judgment that North Korea was about to attack the United States of America or one of its treaty allies. There is no reason to wait until Tokyo is destroyed, or Seoul is destroyed, or San Francisco is destroyed. If it's about to happen, ethically, morally, and legally, we can strike then. That's why I said the North Koreans are creating a vulnerability that they do not now have. Did I share this view with them? Yes, I hope they got the right distinction here between preemption and preventive war. But right now, I'm not worried about them, I'm worried about you. I want to make sure you got this right. I don't mean you have to agree with me about preventive war and preemption. I just, the distinction is a real one, and governments have reasons why they blur the two. Right? So I'm not for preventive war with North Korea. I am for preemption if they are about to attack. Unlock the door. Now, what is it that I feel comfortable saying about what the North Koreans in the PRK said to us in Kuala Lumpur? I think I'm comfortable saying that I was asked rhetorically, how could we trust you? You want us to give up our nuclear weapons. How could we trust you not to launch regime change? Look what you did in Iraq. Look what you did in Libya. Look what you talked about doing in Iran. How could we trust you? So two things were in my mind. One was, how could they trust us? The other was, what were we thinking back all those years when we were negotiating the agreed framework? Which was, as far as we knew, or at least I knew, was going to stop their nuclear weapons program, because I didn't know they would engage with the Pakistanis for an enrichment program, basing a program on highly enriched uranium. I knew about the plutonium program. I knew lots about the plutonium program, and we were going to stop that sucker. So what was my view then about why they would trust us? It was that we would develop, after the framework was signed, a political relationship. We would open liaison offices in Pyongyang. They would open one in Washington. We would develop cultural ties, political ties. Situation would warm between North and South, etc., etc. I have the same answer now. And I said, the only way I can conceive of you trusting us is in the context of a political settlement that includes a peace treaty to replace the armistice. That's how I got to the human rights thing. How could we do that? We could do that if you move to accept international standards that transcend sovereign borders, or the way governments treat their own people. That does not mean you have to give up your regime. So we had that kind of a discussion, and I would say we had a discussion that went into some of the questions that I put here in a little bit of depth, but I don't feel comfortable trying to capture their words to me that were said in private. I want to say one other thing here while I've got the floor, and that is that while we were very focused in Kuala Lumpur on the coming American election today, and a new government, which at that moment I didn't know who was going to win, and I don't sitting here in front of you now, But I observed that there was another election that was going to take place towards the end of 2017 in the Republic of Korea, and that was going to be important too. And that I could not imagine any sustained and serious engagement of the United States with the DPRK that was not done with the concurrence, and dare I say enthusiasm, of the government in Seoul. And we would also want Tokyo to be aboard to those discussions too. So I haven't emphasized the role of the Republic of Korea this afternoon, but I don't believe what I have talked about as engagement is plausible if a government is elected in Seoul that doesn't favor engagement. Our alliance comes first, and I think we will take care of that alliance. I don't know of another one of your points, Larry, was about how you get the Chinese to do what we want the Chinese to do. And I don't have any keys to that. I think what I worry about is the reverse of that in a way. Anybody who's been in government knows that governments do not stay in the lane. So we might want to talk to the Chinese about the North Koreans. And they might want to talk to us about Taiwan. We don't want to talk about Taiwan, right? Not particularly, not the way they want to talk about Taiwan, nor do we want to talk about the South China Sea at the same time as we're asking for something in Northeast Asia. So in a way, I worry about the obverse, or whatever that is, of your question of how do you influence the Chinese? Well, you can do linkage politics, but they can do it too. And you have to think that one through before you start doing that. Otherwise, you can end up with the short end of the stick rather than the long end of the stick, and that's not too good.
Okay, now I will open to the floor. Any questions from the floor? Would you please come to the microphone, the program microphone? You know what it is in that. You're back.
Thank you very much. I'm King Walter from NHK, and I have a question. This year, many senior diplomats and officers defected from North Korea, and it would suggest that the inner politics is drastically changing with North Korea. Maybe less stable their direction. Did you feel anything which changed compared to before the conversation at Kuala-Lumpur? And if the situation is changing within North Korea, less stable or more vulnerable situation, what do you think the probability of they are going to run into dangerous adventure is increasing or decreasing?
It's not a bad question, I'm just not up to the answer, which is to say I don't have much to base an answer on in terms of engagement or even reading tea leaves from the news. I don't sense a particular vulnerability of the regime right now. What I've heard about the economic activity at least in Pyongyang, it sounds as though, I don't want to say that the DPRK is thriving under international sanctions, but it is not apparently suffering as much as some might have anticipated, or those particularly who hoped that the Iran model might be applied to the DPRK. It doesn't appear that it could be. So I see nothing in all of that that would suggest a particular vulnerability or instability right now. So.
Thank you. Grace?
Excuse me, I'm with Grace Kang with North Korean refugees in the United States. Thank you so much for your very insightful comments, Ambassador Gallucci. I just have a question on this very out-of-the-box idea. It's a way to greatly increase diplomatic, political, and legal pressure on the regime and China without being threatening militarily. And that is to have the international community adopt a one Korea policy. You mentioned Taiwan, and history shows that it is possible to recognize a different China than what was originally in the UN, and it was done through action in the General Assembly. And I'm just wondering if the legitimacy of the DPRK could be raised as an issue in the General Assembly, and as year after year passes, could political will be built up enough with all the countries of the world instead of only focusing on China or the usual states, to get the world to accept a one Korea policy based on the fact that the General Assembly, after the end of World War II, stated that Korea needed to